We now have Labour Party candidates using interpreters to speak to their potential voters.
The battle now starts, and we're going to go out there and knock on every single door and make sure we get support for Labour and send Rishi Sunak a clear message. Enough is enough.
जी मुझे भी बहुत खुशी है कि अजहर अली हमारा जो भाई है यहाँ सिलेक्ट हुआ है राष्ट्रदल में लेबर पार्टी की तरफ से। अजहर एक बहुत ही तजर्बाकार सियासतदान है जो हमारी खुशी और गमी को समझता है।
We also have a Labour-controlled council appearing to pause for an Islamic prayer before meetings.
Please remain standing for prayers.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم.
And in the last couple of hours, it's emerged that the Labour Party is now polling and holding focus groups because Sir Keir Starmer is concerned that he's lost his, quote, core vote. One senior Labour MP told The Guardian, Muslims are not only predominantly Labour supporters, but they're also geographically important. There are many of them in a range of key seats in both the south and the northwest, and we need to pay attention to that. And one Labour frontbencher is quoted as saying, we know we've lost the Muslim vote, and at the very least, their trust. Well, look, Labour is obviously rattled, aren't they? A poll showed that nearly half of the country's Muslim voters voted for them at the last election. Apparently 2/3 of Muslims who actually voted for Labour. If the polls close, this could massively impact Labour. And they've got direct competition because Shamima Begum's lawyer, who told this joke about the Taliban, yeah, there we are, the boys are back in town there as they rolled into Kabul, is standing against a Labour MP in Bethnal Green. Now, he's not the only one running on an overtly pro-Palestine ticket. In fact, Wes Streeting, widely tipped as a future Labour leader, possibly even a future Prime Minister, is vulnerable. A pro-Palestine candidate is set to stand against him. Later in this show, I'll be dissecting the latest shocking figures which reveal the UK's population is set to grow by 6.6 million people. 6.1 million of that is supposedly down to immigration. And what countries are these people coming from? Translators to speak to voters, Islamic prayers at council meetings, frantic attempts to get the British Muslim vote back for Labour. Has integration completely failed? But let's get the thoughts of my panel now. I'm going to be joined for the evening by the wonderful GBNews star presenter Nana Akua. I have got Conservative Party politician Jonathan Gullis and author and broadcaster Amy Nicole Turner. Thank you very much for joining me. Nana, has integration failed when you look at things like that?
Well, I mean, a little while ago I did a piece for the Daily Mail saying that multiculturalism has failed. And contrary to popular belief, some people think that multiculturalism means a wonderful mix and, an integration. But multiculturalism is actually not integration. It's the very opposite of that. It's pockets of different cultures living their own separate identities. Multiculturalism has failed, I believe, in this country. And even though we live in a multicultural society, which is different, which means there's lots of cultures within the society, in my view, this is an example of its failure. And the reason I say this is because if you are in a predominantly British, English-speaking country and you have to then speak a different language, which is likely to be the prevailing language by the sounds of it, within that population there, then that is an indication that a lot of people who have come to the country have not integrated, have not even bothered to learn English because they don't understand what was going on and therefore need to be spoken in their mother tongue. And to me, that is disconcerting.
Amy, is Nana right about that?
No, I think you've got that clip a bit wrong because he wasn't translating. He was just interpreting and saying a different message on behalf of the Urdu community because the Pakistani community there is one of the largest in the UK. So it was basically like when people go to Wales and do a little bit in Welsh. Like, I don't see the problem here.
So what was he talking about? You know what he was saying? He
was saying something like, oh, this is why you should vote for him, he's pretty good, blah, blah, blah. He wasn't translating. He was actually acknowledging
we might be at risk of splitting hairs.
Yeah, but the point
No, we're not, because it was just acknowledging the demographic of that area, which it has a large...
other people to understand.
Yeah, because in the 70s, a large Pakistani immigrants came over at request of the British government to fill labour gaps. A lot of them couldn't speak English, which has created...
clearly.
But we didn't facilitate that. The British government at the time did not facilitate that.
Speak English. This is all you're doing is.
I don't know why you would blame the people
blaming anything.
when they've come here,
it's an indication.
plugged our labour gaps, served our communities and are now as British as me, Jonathan and you.
All right, what I'll do is, Jonathan's making his debut tonight, so we've got off to a fiery start. Look, what do you think about the idea of calls to prayer at the start of council meetings and things?
So look, with the particular clip that you've seen, look, I'll fess up, Patrick, and your viewers may be shocked by this. I've got a sizable Pakistani Kashmiri community. I've distributed literature which is both in English and in Urdu because ultimately, whether I like it or not, everyone, in terms of people being able to speak the English language, everyone who has a right to vote should have the ability to feel enfranchised in that system. And I want to make sure everyone who is able to vote therefore feels that they've heard the arguments I'm putting forward. So, I'm certainly not going to give double standards here and attack Afzal, who I do like, by the way, and got on quite well with. But I do totally agree that when it comes to integration, we're not seeing enough. In my own constituency, there are pockets of communities which are predominantly Pakistani, Kashmiri, and other parts which are predominantly white working-class British. And there has been a failure to properly integrate communities and actually understand differences, but also to respect, as we expect, the ability to speak our natural language. At the end of the day, the French have much stricter rules when it comes to being able to speak their language if you are seeking to stay there permanently. Otherwise, you are at risk of being deported from and having your visa revoked. I certainly, and the New Conservatives have made it very clear in our immigration plan that anything going forward, the Prime Minister must make it clear that regardless of what profession you're going to go into, you must meet a higher threshold in the ability to speak in the English language, because otherwise these barriers will never be broken down.
Do you think that's fair enough? No?
I think that's the point. That is the point, isn't it? We need to have proper integration and also for people to assimilate to the culture that they've arrived in. A lot of these countries where some of these people come from, you couldn't do that there. You know what I mean? You couldn't instill your own thing there. So I just think, you've come, when in Rome, do as the Romans. That's just my view. But I do believe you keep your cultural identity, but at least integrate.
Something interesting, though, to pick up on that. So a load of Pakistani people came over here in the 60s and 70s. And then, actually, what's happened is 80,000 people have gone back to Pakistan and now there's a bit of Pakistan called Little England, where they don't necessarily speak Urdu and they speak British. And they're British Pakistanis living in Pakistan. Okay. So it works both ways.
I mean,
it does work that way, but it doesn't sound like it's working.
I'm not sure it works extensively both ways, to be fair.
Well, have you ever... I'm sorry, have you ever been anywhere where there's British people living? Have you ever been to Benidorm, for example? They don't exactly embrace the Spanish. Like, all communities.
That's true, roast dinner on a Sunday, I get it, full English for breakfast every day. I mean, the Brits are not notoriously good travellers, but I suppose at the same time, though, the argument might be, Jonathan, if you are going to permanently live and work in this country and then start a family in this country, with respect, a lot of the Brits are expats, so it's kind of like a retirement thing. So as if you are going to then tap into all of our public services over here, maybe there should be more of a focus.
Oh, look, Patrick, you've hit the nail on the head here. Look, I've worked in education before I became a member of Parliament, and I've got schools in Stoke-on-Trent that have got a whole variety of teaching assistants simply to act as translators between the teacher and the pupil. That's a huge financial strain on the school, and not including all the children equally at the same way when it comes to trying to gain that education that is so vital if you're really going to transform the lives of young people up and down our country. So, and the strain on the NHS, the cost to our police force is totally unacceptable. You are correct. If you're going to live in another country, you need to assimilate, and that means being able to speak at the very least and understand
such a demand on the individual, though. Why not put that? The people issuing the visas should surely facilitate a way that these people can learn English easily and effectively.
But Amy, if people are choosing, and it is their choice to come here, then therefore they should expect to meet the standards that we would expect if we were moving to their country to be able to interact with their public services or to interact with their businesses.
No, but you're talking about expats, so people have gone there kind of to retire, and I doubt that if the Spanish were having some sort of election, they'd have somebody speaking in Spanish and somebody speaking in English to accommodate for the expats there.
I imagine somebody coming over to work in the steel industry in 1977 would have wanted nothing more than to learn English and speak English, but probably didn't have the time or the facilities or the resources to do that.
Can I ask this question on that story that landed just a couple of hours ago, right, which is in The Guardian, and it is about Labour apparently having these focus groups now about how they can get this Muslim vote back. We spoke there about a couple of Labour MPs who are definitely vulnerable, I think, to overtly pro-Palestine candidates standing against them. Jonathan, I'm just going to go to you on this, because, you're kind of behind the curtain in Westminster, as it were. Firstly, how concerned do you think Labour should be about this thing? And also, what's the point of focus groups? I mean, what are they going to tell him here, really?
So, look, I don't get why Keir Starmer has to live by focus group, but it shows you why he's so flexible in being able to go from one position to the next on week in, week out. I mean, it's exhausting for you and I suppose, as well as the British public, trying to keep up with where he stands this week on whatever issue that he's stuck his finger to figure out which way the wind is blowing. In terms of, for Labour, they should take this seriously. I know a number of Labour councillors in Stoke-on-Trent who really want to come out with a very strong pro-Palestine message, but are fearful that they will lose the Labour whip, and at the moment are seething behind the scenes because they're biting their tongue. You can see it, Tahir Ali coming out with that Prime Minister's question last week, basically being a spokesperson for Hamas, essentially, trying to push a very unfair message against the Prime Minister, despite the fact that Hamas are the ones with hostages, Hamas are the ones who are allowing their people to live in poverty, Hamas are the ones who are stealing aid out of the hands of the people of Gaza, and Hamas are obviously allowing their leaders to live in luxury penthouses in Qatar worth billions of pounds a year. The idea, therefore, that Labour can somehow try and tread a thin line is for the birds. You either are on one side of this or the other, and I think that Labour should take this threat very, very seriously indeed.
I mean, do you think it is a threat for the Labour Party, the idea of these pro-Palestine candidates?
I think that's an outrageous accusation to make about when anyone who's a critic of Israel's methodology in this war, in this conflict, is not automatically pro-Hamas. Like, you must differentiate between the two. You can criticise...
Tahir Ali's language to say the Prime Minister had blood on his hands...
By supporting Israel.
By supporting Israel, who are seeking to destroy Hamas, who will continue to hold hostages against their will, who have murdered over 1,200 innocent men, women and children, who have said, and they will continue to fire rockets, continue to have more October 7th, in fact, broke the initial ceasefire by firing rockets, you know, and yet their leaders are worth billions of pounds living in Qatar and safety whilst their people live in poverty. For Tahir Ali to claim that the British Prime Minister somehow has blood on his hands for simply saying that Israel has a right to self-defence is disgusting and immoral.
Because it's no longer self-defence, is it? It's clearly offence.
Of course it is self-defence.
The case is still open as to
but,
whether it's a genocide.
If Hamas stop firing
it's pretty much
the
an
rockets
agreement
to give
now.
back the hostages,
all right,
then perhaps the thing could end. But they won't, will they?
Right. Off to a fiery start. Thank you very, very much. That was, of course, Jonathan Gullis, Conservative MP, author and broadcaster Amy Nicole Turner, and GBNews star presenter Nana Akuyam.